that we need more well-fed, well-nourished women living their power. Like that's what it's about. And what's the next step? It's like, okay, so you feed yourself well, but why? Like, it's so that you can live your purpose. It's so that you can really, so that nourishment piece just isn't getting in the way of you bringing your gifts to the world.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. Lucia Mazzella is a functional health cycle coach of Ambrosia's Table. She teaches traditional kitchen wisdom to women and people with periods who want to take their health into their own hands and live in sync with their cycles. Her approach is simple, down to earth, and practical, and it focuses on reducing period pain and PMS while balancing hormone naturally using food as medicine. We have this really cool conversation in this episode where I ask Lucia to just explain her journey and how she came to this and how she used food as medicine to heal her chronic fatigue, but also how we can use it to support our fertility, our overall menstrual cycle health. And Lucia says in the episode towards the end something really powerful about basically how using food, eating food correctly, giving ourselves permission to nourish ourselves, being well-fed women is a real act of the feminine rising, in my words, of a reclamation of empowerment, and how it's just so important for us to do for ourselves. So in this conversation, we're talking about why food is so important for hormone health, why Lucia takes the approach of eating for your cycle versus cycle syncing food, how we can nourish ourselves, and not just ourselves but our whole families, and set everybody up for lifetimes and intergenerational reclamation really of eating properly, why we need to be thinking about batching our food and preparing our food, and how to give ourselves a lot of grace through that process, and how we can get started. So Lucia is just such a beautiful person who I've absolutely loved connecting with. We're both cycle coaches, and we met together on the cycle coach training with Claire Baker a couple of years ago, and then we've both taken that training and gone our different ways as cycle coaches, but we have always stayed in touch and supported each other. And I am so happy to share Lucia with you today. If you don't follow her, go and check out her Instagram. It's in the show notes, and she is at Ambrosia's Table. Okay, settle down with something nourishing and delicious, and get ready for a gorgeous conversation about eating for our menstrual cycle health. Hey Lucia, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Oh, so good. I'm just absolutely stoked to be having this convo with you. And just sitting here in a beautiful little cabin down on the Eagle Hawk Peninsula in Tasmania. And we're just about to get the fire lit. And I just couldn't think of anyone that I'd rather have a conversation with right now than you.
Ah, thank you. And what a beautiful place to be in the world. I can see a little peek out your window, and it does look gorgeous. So let's take that a level deeper. Where are you in your cycle today, if you have a cycle, and how does that feel for you?
So I'm around cycle day 11 or 12. So spring is springing in my world at the moment. So what that feels like is, pretty good. Enjoying the motivation and, the return of to the world, I guess. But as well, somewhat more heady and a little bit more prone to anxiety and overwhelm, as I'm sure you can relate.
Sure can. Yeah, so I'm in the opposite pole of my cycle. I'm day 29, but nowhere near bleeding. Gonna have a long cycle again. Feeling today a little bit sore in my back, but happy, bit playful, bit cheeky, got some decent energy, just feeling quite optimistic. And I was not grounded at all this morning, but I did some breathing and dropped into my womb, and now I feel a lot more settled and grounded. Yeah, so a bit all over the shop today, but feeling good.
It's interesting. It's like we're both at those points of the cycle where you really need, I mean, I guess you could kind of make an argument that you need self-care all the time, but there's times where it really comes to the forefront and that prioritizing it just pays off big time. And for me, autumn and spring would probably be those times.
Yeah, 100%. I really agree. And it's that transitional point of, like, I feel like it's going to come in the next few days, like that transition into something deeper and something a bit heavier and something a bit more where I start to feel a bit shakier in myself again. And it happens every cycle. But just when it happens is variable for me at the minute with this irregularity of my cycle. But yeah, it's these points where it's like, okay, like really drop in, like really pay attention, really listen in, and really kind of, yeah, honor what you need at this point.
Yeah, totally agree.
So we are here to talk about the work that you do in the world, which is amazing, by the way. And I've just loved getting to know you and seeing what you do and seeing you share it. And we met back, a couple of years ago now, doing cycle coach training together.
Yeah.
And you are, well, tell us all about you. Tell us what you do and why you have chosen this particular area of cycle coaching to be your gift to the world.
For sure. Yeah, it's so nice that we're, that first cohort of Claire Baker's cycle coach school and just going out into the world and then slowly like kind of curating our own little flavors and yeah, nestling down in our niches. So yeah, I came to so what I would say is I teach like women and people with periods how to eat for balanced hormones and how to cook with the different phases of the menstrual cycle. And I mean, for me, I have a history of chronic fatigue syndrome. So I found myself like just really tired, lethargic, anxious, flat all of the time. I'd had a journey with going to different doctors and trying to get a diagnosis, and it turns out it's just there was a lot of things, right? But gut health and I think they love to slap on a chronic fatigue thing. To me, that didn't mean much. So anyway, I changed everything. I changed the way that I ate. I started really, really prioritizing self-care. And for me, I was so lucky to come across this work of menstrual cycle awareness in my early 20s. And it was like, boom, like, oh, wow, this food piece meets menstrual cycle awareness, and like, hey, this is the missing key. This is how we do it. Like so many of us, women in particular, are feeling like it's so hard to be consistent, right? Because you're all motivated one week and you're like, hell yeah, I'm making the smoothies and the chocolate from scratch and all the slow cooked meats or whatever kitchen goodness you're into. And then the next week you're like, oh my gosh, Uber Eats and toasted cheese sandwich.
Are you in my head?
It's funny because we don't, like, I live rurally. I'm like, I don't actually have Uber Eats, but sometimes I wish.
Yeah, we don't have Uber Eats here either. I'm like in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, but so we have to go pick up stuff. But yeah, there's definitely that point in my cycle where I'm like, fuck, I just want takeout and I can't be bothered to cook, and it means a schlep into town, but it's worth it. on that kind of, when that energy
Totally.
of like, nah, not got the capacity. I really hear you. And then there are the points where I feel like, oh, I just want to eat clean and I just want to eat well and I just want to like have nourishing food and just wish that would last. That energy.
Totally. And I feel like I guess that's a big part of my message as well, or maybe my approach that maybe varies to what people have heard of in this space is very much what comes to mind for people is cycle syncing your food. And I'm like, hell yeah, that is so awesome if you want to do that. And at the same time, I really want to bring it back to basics and not overcomplicate things where they don't need to be. So really for me, I think it's more helpful to know what foods are nourishing your fertility, your cycle, the same thing, by the way, all month long. So, you're looking after your blood sugar balance, you're eating to support your liver health, you're supporting your gut health, and you're eating nutrient dense foods with consistency all month long. So that when you get to those points in your cycle, you're in autumn, but you're like, oh, this is just how we eat. Like I just eat like this. And it's not, I guess it's getting to that point where it's requiring less willpower because it's actually a habit that's been embedded. Um, and yeah, that sort of, I feel the big impact of it is you're able to build momentum in your life more easily because you're not having these big highs and these big lows so much in the different phases of your cycle.
I think that's fascinating because, like you say, I hear the messaging that, this food is really good for your pre-ovulation phase, and this phase is really important to eat during your ovulation, and then premenstrually, this, and it can differ quite a lot, and it's that sense of like, oh, how do I remember all of those things and make it a habit, especially when I'm the only person with a menstrual cycle in my house. So I love that point of difference that you're talking about, where it's like, actually, we don't need to think about 4 different menus for each season of your cycle. It's more like, let's just nourish your body so that your body has everything it needs to do well across the whole thing. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And then the way that you cook is different. So that there are times in the month where you don't have to cook because you've actually got everything prepared and you're stocked up. And there are times in the week where you don't have to cook as well. So it's about, you know, thinking about what are the pieces that you need to be able to create that consistency because it's just not realistic to be cooking the way that we kind of taught to cook. Like there's this really just this big hole of like in information of like how to make this doable. You know, you see the photos and stuff online of beautiful um, food, healthy food, but it's just not attainable when we're not actually putting in place strategies that are able to be aligned with our cycles.
Totally. It's that masculine underlying structure that we all need and that routine. And, yes, we can flow across our cycle, but we still need that to underpin our efforts. I really hear that. So let's just go back to, the basics. Like, the food that we eat can mess up our hormones if it's not great food, or it can really nourish them. Can you just explain to us a little bit about why food can be medicine for our menstrual cycle?
Such a big question. I love it. I feel like, I believe it's Nicole Jardim who says that it's like food is the number one um, cause. Like when there's a lack of nutrients from food, it's the number one cause of hormonal imbalance. So it's like you're only as healthy as the nutrients that you absorb from your food. So we really need to be focusing on digestion and nutrient density to be able to get the building blocks for your hormones and to be able to do things like reduce inflammation, which then trickles down and has a flow-on effect to your period pain. So really food is central to that. And I think a big piece of it is around feeling safe. So thinking about food as settling your nervous system. And I know you'll be able to feel when when you're like all heady and maybe you've had a cup of coffee before breakfast or whatever, and you start to get all frazzled. So what's happening is it's disrupting your blood sugar balance. But I think it's sometimes more helpful to know how that feels in your body so that you're able to, course correct, and you're able to eat that grounding meal and feel yourself come back into your body. Like, that feeling where you're like, zhunk, okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just sort of really coming at it from an embodied approach. So it's like, yes, we kind of know these concepts that can be quite tricky, but how does that feel in your body? And then how can you make a plan with the food that you eat today to feel better and more grounded?
I love that, the concept that we're creating safety in our body through the food that we eat, and grounding and nourishing ourselves and letting our nervous systems know that we are safe and that we are here and all is well. I think that's a really, really cool perspective. I've never thought of it like that before.
Yeah, and we know that when we're just in that fight and flight state, our body just doesn't prioritize digestion and it doesn't prioritize reproduction. So it's quite a simple but effective strategy to come back into in your mind, because I'm sure you can think of right now 5 things you could do to get into that rest and digest state. Taking some deep belly breaths, going and spending some time in nature, having a bath, having a little dance. Like, there's so many simple things that you can do that are maybe not food related as well. It's not all about food.
But it's a really important thing that we do several times a day, and we can either, you can either take steps towards better health and better being in your body and looking after yourself, or you can take steps to go in the opposite direction, can't you? And, I think of, in those little choices, like you say, it's in those habits. Like, we have to eat, so we can do it consciously and in a way, especially, I imagine that people who, a branch of people that you might work with are people who are having, period problems, cycle problems. And it's like, well, this is one of those foundational things. And like you said at the top, your practice has been about the self-care as well, but food has been like the thing, everything else, that's like the bottom. And then I feel like everything else kind of flows from there and supports. Does that feel true for you?
So I kind of take what I call a food first approach. So because of personal experience, it's meant that for me, when I was actually getting the food that my body needed, I had the capacity and the energy to then do all of the other things, like implement movement, experiment with meditation and all of the things, right? There are so many different pulls on your energy, like as a modern woman, or, if you're a mother as well, then there's just so many things that you're wanting to prioritize. So I feel like it's really helpful to simplify. And it might not be the same for everyone, but I believe that food can be a really, really powerful place to start. And even more within that space, that looking at the hormones. So cortisol and insulin are your tier 1 hormones, which have a flow-on effect to all of the other hormones. So when you're really looking at eating to have balanced blood sugar and eating to really take care of your stress response, it's going to have the most bang for your buck, you could say. So it's about, again, just narrowing down that focus so that we're not having this kind of overwhelm feeling, and just being like, okay, these are the simple things that we can do, like eating breakfast. Even trickling it down to just that one thing. If that's one thing you take from this talk, focus on eating breakfast within an hour of waking. So this is, controversial space with the intermittent fasting, but let's just say I'm not a fan, but, everyone can have their own opinions. But yeah, for women and people with periods, like, it's just not something that the results aren't supported for our physiology. The results in science are not there. They're all done on males. So we need a different approach, and we need to eat breakfast, and we need to make sure that we have enough protein at breakfast. And you feel it when you do it. You feel just how differently that sets you up for the whole day, having more balanced blood sugar and feeling more steady and grounded.
That's such an interesting point. You know, what you said there about the hormones, the stress hormones, particularly needing, you know, that nourishment and, you know, everything kind of flowing from there and eating breakfast. And it's something that's quite, you've just really spoken to what it's like in my house. So I'm a big fan of breakfast, and, you know, I have the same thing every day because it nourishes me. And I have a bowl of oats, but then I also have chia in it and some nut butter and some, what else do I put in there? I've got like some mushroom cacao powder and cinnamon, and then maybe a little bit of honey on the side. And I really like that, but it just kind of sets me up. I can feel the difference when I have that between versus when I have like toast. Toast just never, I just don't feel like I've eaten. I feel like I've, you know, I'm so hungry again really soon. And I can feel that blood sugar spike just all over the shop. But my husband, man, he doesn't eat breakfast, and he will like have a couple of coffees on an empty stomach, and I'm just like, and I don't know whether, you know, so what you're saying here, I'm just wondering whether this same wisdom applies for men. I'm curious.
I mean, good question. Yeah. I guess it's highly variable. There's different reasons why people would benefit from intermittent fasting. So it's more likely that males will benefit. However, having multiple coffees on an empty stomach, is that good for anyone? That's all I will say.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. I'm like, just eat something. Anyway, so that's really helpful. That's really good wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. And, you know, so we've talked about, you know, the hormones, the building blocks. So in terms of the cycle, we are, you know, the cycle is all about ovulation, and that being like, you know, the defining kind of marker of health, and really the ultimate goal of when you've got a menstrual cycle is that you want to ovulate, you know, for your long-term health and, you know, all the reasons why. Does this support ovulation? And, you know, maybe I'm thinking as well, as a side note, if somebody was, you know, looking at boosting their fertility, supporting their fertility as much as possible, is really paying attention to the food that you're eating across your cycle going to nourish your fertility as well? I mean, you did say earlier on it's the same thing, but I'm just curious to hear you speak to that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I feel like this is such a it's so common to in like Western medicine particularly to separate things out. Like we don't need to be eating differently if we're wanting to have a healthy period. We don't need to be eating differently to optimize ovulation. We don't need to be eating differently for preconception. Like when you're understanding the foundational things that build and support female physiology, you understand that, yeah, sure, there might be some specific things that, oh, actually, I understand that eating this fish right now is going to be helping with fetal development, as opposed to like maybe my main motivation was reducing inflammation, you know, getting those omegas to have less period pain. Like there might be different motivating factors, which is why it's interesting and helpful to have specific knowledge during those different life stages. But ultimately, it's the same thing. And it's about eating for vitality, eating for fertility, so that we can feel our best, whether we're wanting to have babies or not.
Love that so much. And, you know, I guess that ties into somebody going through menarche, you know, their first and early periods, you know, right the way through the middle years of menstrual cycle, postpartum as well, pregnancy and postpartum, right through to perimenopause. All of it about just nourishing yourself, giving yourself those building blocks, and like you say, eating for vitality.
I know. And like, I mean, the thing that makes me really sad is just that there's this narrative around what it means to be a woman, that you get your period, you suffer. Then, you have a baby and you suffer. Obviously, this is just big brushstrokes here. But this is the narrative that we're absorbing. And then you have perimenopause and oh, it just gets worse. And then menopause, oh, watch out, that's hell. So it's like really rewriting this entire story of the menstrual cycle and what that means, that when we're building health like this from a young age, even all the way down to the formative years as being a kid, like it's cycles within cycles.
Totally.
It's like, yeah, when we're really building those foundations of health, we're setting ourselves up to go smoothly through the different life stages.
I love that. I think that's so valuable, and so, like you said, like making it kind of simple as well. It's that approach of, instead of kind of going like, what do I need to do now, and changing it up and researching and doing things differently. It's like if we can get this habit and set it up from as early as possible, and maybe show the younger people in our lives if you've got children or something like that, and then just carrying it all the way through, and that just being your, like you say, that habit, that life approach.
Exactly. And that, then if you do have kids, that you're then passing on that generational like health through your literal body
Yeah.
to them. And of course, passing on the wisdom through the way that you nourished yourself and your family.
Amazing. Oh, love it. So could you share with us, if you're happy to, just some top tips, the things that you might find are maybe the first few places like people fall down, and how people could get into it.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a really good starting place is, of course, period meal prep. So, I actually have a free guide for this if you go into my Insta bio. Um, you can download that so then you can just got some easy recipes to try out for this. But I think, it's easy to prioritize things when you're at rock bottom in a way, whatever it may be in your life. So then looking at the cycle when you are really like, okay, I'm not going to have energy at that phase, it's easier to decide, okay, I'm going to do a bit of meal prep so that when I'm bleeding, I can optimize my rest at that phase, rather than thinking, okay, I need to meal prep all month long, and then it's this big thing that becomes too hard. And yeah, just moving away from that all or nothing thinking and bringing it right back to that. So 3 things that I recommend cooking before you're at the very end of autumn. So if you know that for you the last few days before you bleed are really no-go days, make sure you're set up for those days too. So that's what we're talking about as well when we talk about winter, is just when you're transitioning into that winter energy. So yeah, make sure you've got a protein on hand. Make sure you've got a soup, and I like to use broth-based soup. So just as the liquid in the soup, adding in some chicken stock or some bone broth or whatever. And then having a sweet treat, because we know you're going to want chocolate. Like,
Hell yeah.
this is straight facts. So, how much better to be eating this scrumptious homemade decadence rather than, eating something that, hits the spot at the time, but is just exacerbating your symptoms and then makes you feel a bit sick. And then you're like, now I'm bleeding and feel a bit sick.
Yeah, and you do the most amazing chocolate workshops and recipes. And I just love your Instagram pictures of all your food, and particularly the chocolate ones. But it just looks like your food, it looks like sin, not like punishment. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like divine and decadent, but wholesome and good, and it's not rabbit food.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm like, are we allowed to swear on this? I have no space for freaking rabbit food. That's so funny. Yeah, it's so nice to paint the picture of what health can look like. It really does not have to be kind of what we're fed in purity culture. So yeah, really changing the way that that looks, and there's so much unlearning to be done as well. We're just constantly being bombarded with messages to restrict and, to eat clean, whatever that means, and it's just loaded. Like we've been kind of marinating in this anti-meat kind of rhetoric for 50 years because of the way that, because of the dietary guidelines and how they be currently. But yeah, it really makes you think about food differently. And it's nice to just not let those thoughts go unquestioned. So it's nice to kind of really excavate your own thoughts and beliefs around, oh, why is it that I feel that this is lighter or better? Or, yeah, just making sure to really go deep with the questioning there and look into what ancestral wisdom there is to be gained, especially with female fertility, because we don't have the science. We haven't been included in clinical trials up until 1993. And to this day in Australia, it is not legal. We're not legally required to be included in medical trials. So we're even further behind the States. So in some regards, like, we're in the dark ages of women's health, sadly. And I believe that's when it's really helpful to kind of zoom out and look at the evidence that we have from cultures that have had successful diets in the past and what we experience in the present as well in our own bodies.
Powerful stuff. Still in the dark ages of women's health. Yeah, God. Oh,
Sad face.
yeah, that feels like a whole other podcast, a whole other rant. But yeah, thank you for sharing that and highlighting that, because it's so true. And I really hear what you have said there about, purity culture and eating clean. And, I used that word earlier on as well. And it's like, well, I have to ask myself, like, what does that even mean? What does it mean? What does it mean?
No shade there to you at all. Like, it's within us. It's almost like you could draw the reference of like racism, like we have it inherently in us, and just because of the society and everything and what we've been unconsciously absorbing. And then it's that practice of excavating, be like, hang on, what is that thought? I don't believe that can go, so
Totally.
it's really just, yeah, bringing things to the light.
I think that's such a powerful act as well, to reclaim our relationship with our bodies and our food. And it's another way of kind of shaming ourselves as well, isn't it? The whole diet industry. And this is absolutely not what you're talking about whatsoever. And I love the way that you're coming at it from this. Food is medicine. And there feels like just so much space and permission and ease in the way that you share this, not needing to be super specific, every single day, tweaking it. It's like, let's just set ourselves up. Let's just eat to really sustain our hormones, our bodies, to the energy that we need for ovulation and for growth and repairing and healing and all of those things, and just really, getting through in a practical way in this world that we live in. And, we do have these ebbs and flows, and so honoring that, but in a way that's, it just feels like I kind of just want to go, I kind of like, okay, it's not that scary thing where I've got to go and get my calendar out and kind of, do a different shop every week essentially, and different, like I said, different menus, and, cooking different food for the rest of the house. It's like, actually, we can all just eat the same thing together and nourish everybody, and our bodies just take what it needs from that. So it just feels really, really lovely.
Totally. And as a whole, like, most women don't eat enough food. So it's like, what's the messaging there? Like, the best thing women can do in the eyes of society is be small and take up less space. It's like, actually, hell no. I am going to feed myself well. And that's at the core of it is like, I just really believe that we need more well-fed, well-nourished women living their power. Like that's what it's about. And what's the next step? It's like, okay, so you feed yourself well, but why? Like it's so that you can live your purpose. It's so that you can really, so that um, nourishment piece just isn't getting in the way of you bringing your gifts to the world.
Ah, that feels amazing. Love that so much. So, yeah, well, like we're both just doing here like a little chair dance over Zoom together that you can't see. So tell us then, how can people work with you, learn from you, find you?
Yay, come hang out with me on Instagram, send me a DM, be like, oh, I just listened to your conversation with Charlotte. And yes, the first place, jump on my email list so you can get that period meal prep guide. Because I feel like that's just a really tangible place to start. Like one meal at a time, baby, you got this, one delicious meal at a time, might I add. And then you can work with me inside my course, which is called Moon Menu. And again, going onto my email list will be the best place to get information around when the next round starts. And it's currently in this beautiful transformation phase at the moment. So I'm changing the format, you could say. So it's turning into a 3-month journey because I realized I was like, you know what, this is not, it's funny. I started teaching this course 2 years ago, and it started out being a 1-month course. I then extended it to 6 weeks and then 8 weeks. I'm like, you know what? This needs to be 3 months with an option to extend because we need time to just slowly integrate and implement these little practices one at a time. And then they just build and build and build. And the main thing that I teach is my kitchen flow method, which is a series of different strategies, like learning practices over recipes, because we're just wanting to buy back as much time and as much ease in the kitchen as possible and just avoid that hangry blank stare into the fridge trying to think of what you're gonna cook, whether it's gonna taste good, and how the hell are you gonna make it good for your actual hormones. When you're at that stage, you're incredibly vulnerable to making decisions that aren't in your best interest. So it's like reverse engineering the whole process of your kitchen flow. So everything that goes into meal prepping, batch cooking, and yeah, just eating for fertility, eating for your cycle all month long. So yeah, come and jump on my email list so you can find information about that.
And when's that going to start? When do you think
It's going
begin?
to be starting at the end of August. So we've still got a little bit of time. But yeah, I just can't wait. And this new part will be involving like fresh content coming in each month. So we'll be getting together for a cooking circle session, which is like a live Zoom thing. Because, we all need help with the implementation thing. And it's so nice when you've got somebody there to ask, like, oh, hey, my chocolate ended up being a bit weird. Like, what have I done wrong? Because it's hard when you're just either reading a recipe, which, problems there. I don't know anyone who loves following recipes immaculately.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm a wing it kind of girl.
Exactly. So yeah, having that support to be a wing it kind of girl, but in that safe container, so you're not wasting expensive ingredients,
Totally. Yeah. That sounds incredible. I think it sounds absolutely amazing, and I know it's going to be the best fun, but also lifelong tools and skills, like you said. Yeah, everybody go check out Lucia, and I'll put all of her notes, her link, in the show notes. So go find her, and she does some pretty awesome reels as well, which I've just been loving. I loved your Outlander bunch recently. So it wasn't reels, it was those carousel posts with the memes. I thought that was hilarious. The Outlander ones. So good. So yeah, Lucia is definitely worth a follow. Go find her. But my last question before we close is, and it's it's kind of a big question to end with, but if you had to pick one thing, what's the greatest lesson you've learned from connecting with your body?
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I need like 5 minutes to like journal. It's such a beautiful question though. You just edit out this thinking time. I think what wants to come through, like what's one of the big things that I've learned from connecting with my body is just slowing down. And I think, yeah, when you have like a chronic illness or when you have health issues going on, it can be easy to sort of feel like, oh, this is so unfair and this is so hard and confusing. But I mean, it kind of led me down this whole path, and I'm so grateful that I had, the privilege and the access and resources to be able to turn my health around, and then to be able to make it like find my passion really at this intersection of menstrual health and whole food eating. So I guess it's around prioritizing self-care. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned from my body with my health issues and stuff like that. Like really, what does that look like to put self-care at the center of your life?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to chat to you.
And you, beautiful. Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.